We are joined now by writer and political commentator Victor Dalziel, who has written his first piece for the Specky this week on the mysterious demise of Australia's ATMs. Victor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm excited by your readers liking my article.
Yes, well, it did go a little bit crazy. Victor, it was all the way back in 2018 when the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, floated the idea of having a cash ban. Now, he tried to argue that it would be safer if cash transactions were limited to $10,000. At the same time, the government said it was gently encouraging a transition toward a digital economy. Now, members of that Liberal government spent a few weeks branding small businesses and people who defended cash as partaking in the black economy, as if cash by its very nature was dubious. Now, this is despite all of human history taking place with cash. And, you know, we survived just fine. Now, needless to say, it was a policy that nearly brought the Liberal government down. The people were not happy and Morrison had to abandon it. But, Victor, something's happening. While no one has banned us from using cash, getting cash seems to be increasingly difficult. Are people imagining it, or are our ATMs vanishing?
No, you're absolutely correct. And that response that happened in 2018 made them decide that they're going to have to do things a little bit more stealthily next time. And I think that part of that stealthiness was the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the early stages. One of the most successful things they did in terms of their determination to get rid of cash was to reframe cash as dirty. I don't know if you remember, there was massive amount of advertising on mainstream news in the newspapers talking about just how dirty cash is. And that was very successful because what happened is that then forced businesses to stop accepting cash. And there was a period of time, it didn't last very long because they quickly realised that cash was still legal tender. But businesses actually did ban cash for 3 or 4 months during COVID. And we were also, during COVID, locked into our homes. So our ability to access cash was also forcibly taken away from us. And as you mentioned in the intro, this was all done in the name of safety and protection and keeping us safe.
Well, and how bad is this problem? Because we're not talking about 3 or 4 ATMs, are we? This is a much bigger problem. And if the ATMs are closed, people are saying, oh, we can always go and get money from Australia Post or from the supermarket. What do you say from that? How big is the problem, and will we be able to get around it?
Look, I'll be completely honest. Being podcaster and writer, you know what it's like. We move across all different subjects and we have to move super quickly. So personally, I had no idea that it was as bad as it actually is until late last year when I actually went looking for cash. And I'm on the Gold Coast, as you know, and Gold Coast has had a massive population boom, 750,000 people. And what we call the business centre of the Gold Coast is in a suburb called Southport. Now, as a lot of business centres around Australia, they have like a main street that existed prior to COVID that had almost every bank branch you could possibly imagine. And all of them, of course, had 2 to 3 ATMs out the front. Now, throughout the COVID period, without anyone really noticing, certainly without me noticing, all of those bank branches shut down. And not only did they shut down, but they also took all their ATMs with them, right? So when I went looking for cash, no luck. And then I realised that when I started to look around other main streets of other suburbs and also in shopping centres, the big 4 banks, their ATMs were completely disappearing. So then I thought I'll just do a little bit of a deep dive on that. And I found a report from APRA from October 2023. And it's not people's imagination, it's not my imagination. In the last 6 years, so since June 2017 to June 2023, 60% of ATMs in Australia have completely disappeared. And it's not just that. When I was doing the search for that, I came across a story about 7-Elevens, 7-Eleven petrol stations and convenience stores. Now, there's over 700 of those across Australia. At that point, which was October, November last year, they had made the decision to get rid of all ATMs. So this is something that is very real. And if you can imagine this, across the whole of Australia, there are only just over 5,500 ATMs left.
That's an absolutely astonishing figure. And for people who say, I'll just go to Coles and Woolworths and get my cash out, well, they're not the biggest fans of cash, are they? They're trying to stop having cash themselves in store, so they're not going to be there. But look, this is like having a cash ban by stealth, where the government doesn't have to get involved, doesn't have to wear the political mileage on it, because the banks are doing it for them. Now, this is taking a society away from cash, which has never been done in human history before, and comes with a lot of risk factors, which we'll get into in a minute. But is this a decision to go cashless, something that should be taken to the public? Like, should we have had a referendum on cash bans instead of the voice to Parliament?
Oh, absolutely, because what we're talking about is the complete dismantling of the fiat currency system. As you touched on earlier, this is a system that has not been a new development. This is something that has existed across the ages. And what they're trying to do, as you also said, by stealth, because they learned under Scott Morrison that they don't want to ask the public about this because they know what the answer will be, they've learned that they have to do it this way. And what I find most insipid about a lot of the reporting around this issue is the focus on how difficult it's going to be for older Australians and disabled Australians. And that's 100% true. But what we're talking about here, when you have cash, you have a unit of exchange in your hand. So effectively, the consumer, you and I, we have the power to do what we want with that unit of exchange, a physical unit of exchange. And they're talking about getting completely rid of that. And so what happens then is the power and the control of our own money shifts from us to the banks and, of course, by proxy, to the government. So that's what we're really talking about here. And that's something that I didn't realise until my research last year. And I don't think that the general Australian on the street realises how vulnerable we are when they take away our access to our own savings and our own money.
Yes,
I mean, just imagine for 1 second what the world will be like if all the bank branches and all the ATMs disappeared. We would lose complete control of access to our money. We would not have the ability to withdraw and move that money and hold physical money anymore. So 100%, we should have been consulted about this. And it's really, if I sound like I'm being alarmist, it's not. I really think that this is very, very dangerous and is leading down a very dangerous path.
Well, look, there are all sorts of implications for a cashless society. And we could talk for hours about programmable currencies, the restrictions of ESG, and like what you can and can't buy, if it's, ethical or not. There's all sorts of stuff like that. But there's one thing that people may not be aware of and is less talked about, but is more dangerous, I believe. And that is the idea of a bank bail-in. Now, can you describe what a bank bail-in is and if it's ever happened before? Because I don't think the general population is as aware of this repercussion of having a cashless society.
So the bank bail-ins were a system that was implemented after the 2008 financial crisis. And what it boils down to is if a bank finds itself in trouble, then what they can do is they can draw on the savings and the money of their customers. So they can use their customers' money to bail themselves out of trouble. So you've got these bankers gambling with this money, making mistakes, not being held accountable, but rather the consumer is being held accountable. And this is legal. It has happened twice in Cyprus, once in 2013 and then again in 2021, I think, and in Italy and Spain in 2017. Now, the really scary part was it was successful in Italy in 2017 and in Spain in 2017. However, it was unsuccessful in Cyprus. And what that meant is that those customers lost their savings. And I think you could remember that there was a real run on the banks in Cyprus where you had big long lines of people trying to withdraw their money and bank branches refusing to allow people in the door because the people realised not only was their bank going bankrupt, but that their savings had disappeared trying to save that bank.
Well, they actually give you no option. So if they can use your money and you can't take it away, you can't safeguard your own money or move it to a different branch because it doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing to transform that money into. It's just theirs. And that is a frightening prospect. It's almost as if these people know that something bad is going to happen soon and they don't want the public to be able to take back control of their finances and their cash. I mean, the government punishes us so severely for being savers. Anything you do to accumulate wealth is punished in this current society. But we've only got time for one more point, and that would be the idea of having a fear of CBDCs. Just quickly, in a couple of minutes, why are people so frightened about the CBDC system?
Because it comes back to what I was saying before about power and control. So people are seeing what has happened. Like in Canada, for example, when the trucker protesters lost access to their bank accounts. So the government disagreed with an action that a citizen was doing, so they locked their bank account. This sort of action is going to be a whole lot easier once the government gets control of our bank accounts. As you were just saying about the bank bailins, we have no choice. And what it turns into is what Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard talks about, and she's labelled it the dictatorship of no alternative. Because what happens is once the government gets control of our money, and then they combine that with Medicare, when they combine that with ATO, and all of our digital IDs all together, and this is very real, they're trialling digital IDs in New South Wales right now. New South Wales already has a digital licence. All of that is going to be put together and integrated into one digital pass. So your money, your ID, everything is going to be in one place. You're going to need to use that to get a mortgage, to apply for a lease, get a car, get your kids into school, into university, everything. And the reason it's called a dictatorship of no alternatives is because nobody, no business, nobody else can compete with the government's control of that information and power. And ultimately, what does that leave you with? I call it techno-fascism. Shoshana calls it a dictatorship of no alternatives. It's authoritarianism, it really is. It's complete and utter surveillance and control by our government.
What it is, Victor, is the same thing that's been going on for thousands of years, just with a new tool that's been given to them for controlling people. But look, this is very scary stuff. Thank you so much for your article, and I advise everyone to go and read it because we need to know what's going on because no one wants to talk about it. But thank you for joining us today on Spectator TV.
No, thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thanks.